In today's show, we're talking Indiana Pacers with the host of the Locked On Pacers podcast. So much intrigue with this team, backcourt, frontcourt, all over the roster. Michael Bolton.
Thanks, Josh. It's Michael Bolton here, and it's time for another episode of the Locked On Fantasy Basketball podcast. Let's get to it.
Let's get to it, indeed.
You are Locked On Fantasy Basketball, your daily fantasy basketball podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball podcast, brought to you by Basketball Monster. My name is Josh Lloyd and I am the lead fantasy analyst at basketballmonster.com and at Yahoo Sports Australia. And you can find me on Twitter, as always, at redrock_bball and on Instagram at Locked On Fantasy Basketball. Thank you for making Locked On Fantasy Basketball your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms. The podcasts are going to be coming thick and fast today. 3 team preview shows, I think. I'm trying to get them all banged out this week, if not in the first couple of days of next week. So we're going to go right through them all this week, and then we'll probably start doing some mock drafts and stuff maybe next week. Maybe. We'll see how that goes. But we're going to talk Indiana Pacers today, so we might as well get it on.
Let's get it on, Gilly.
All right, let's bring you back in. He is the host of the Locked On Pacers podcast. Tony East is here, back with me. Tone, welcome.
Happy to be here. Happy to talk about the Indiana Pacers from a fantasy perspective, Josh.
Now, I know that just before we went to air, I said I'm excited to talk about this team because they're exciting, because they are exciting from a fantasy perspective. And you said, I don't think too many people are thinking that from the Pacers' point of things, but they are. There's young players, there's exciting players, there's players to build around. You know what? I would much rather this team go out there and lose 60 games and be fun with Turner and Jackson and Haliburton, Turner if he's there, who knows, and Mathurin, than seeing TJ Mcconnell dribble the ball for 21 seconds and then miss a three-pointer. That's not fun. I'd rather see some fun and development and things moving forward in the future, and we're going to talk about that right now. We might as well do it, Tony, because how I start all these shows by looking at who came, well, didn't mean to say that, who was into the team and who left. Arriving, Benedict Mathurin, Aaron Nesmith and Daniel Tice in the Malcolm Brogdon deal, Kendall Brown, Andrew Nembhard, and for some reason, Davidas Servaitis, who, well, let's hope doesn't get a roster spot. The big one there, of course, is Mathurin, who they picked pick 6 in the NBA draft. He had a really strong summer league. He played quite well in that and shot efficiently. My issue with Mathurin from a fantasy perspective, I'm going to talk about this more later on in the preseason, is that guards like him, who really rely heavily on scoring, and I'm not really sure what else they're going to provide at this point. They can tend to struggle early on. Jalen Green, Anthony Edwards, who were much higher pedigree players coming in, they were dreadful for the first 2 to 3 months of the season. Does Mathurin offer anything else apart from scoring, do you think, at this point in his career?
I think you're right to say that it'll be mostly a scoring role. He could be a decent rebounder for a guard, but not a big numbers guy in that spot. And, steals are something that when you're a good team defender, maybe you'll get there, but he's more of an on-ball dog, as they say, for the defensive side of the ball. So I don't really project him to be much more than a scorer type in his rookie season.
Yeah, and again, it's an archetype of players that we see come in. They go out there, they struggle with efficiency in a really big way. They get probably too many shots that they should be tasked with at this early age. And they struggle, and we hope that it improves in March and April, as it has for Green and Edwards. As I said, Green and Edwards were top 2 picks. Mathurin is not, and was never really considered in that level, so it's a step down from there. So I think we just all need to temper some expectations based on he was great in Summer League, but that doesn't always translate across to the NBA when you don't have that many strings to your bow at this point. Let's talk quickly out of this group, Daniel Tice. I know he had to come across sort of as salary matching purposes, but why is he still here? Why is he on the roster? Is he going to play? I don't see why you would. Is he the backup center? Is he the 4th string center? What's he doing here?
Yeah, if you just look politically, or you zoom out, it's like he's the second oldest pacer. He's the 3rd highest paid guy. On a lot of teams or in a lot of situations, that would matter to the point of him being in the rotation. And he's okay. He's an okay player. The Celtics traded for him last year for a reason. He's a good basketball player. But the Pacers have Myles Turner, who is better, and they have Goga and Isaiah Jackson and O'Shea Brissett and Terry Taylor and Jalen Smith, who they promised a starting job, also on their team. And they're young, and they would like to develop these young players. So while Tice is good, there's no room for him to play on the Pacers, even despite him being talented and being their 3rd highest paid player and being this veteran who's over 30 years old. So maybe they look to deal him at some point before the season starts or in the season, but I don't see how he would play or what his role would even be on this team.
Yeah, Tice is a guy that I think on a good team plays well. On a bad team, he's dreadful. Like, he was dreadful for the Rockets last season, but he played well on the Celtics because he's just that complementary piece that if you have to force him to do anything that's sort of outside that role, I think he really struggles. And again, it just didn't work in Houston. The Celtics did trade for him. I don't know whether they traded for him or they traded to get out of the Dennis Schroeder business, but that's an argument for another day. But he was there and he was contributing. In terms of the guys they lost, how many wakes were held around Indianapolis for the fact that Lance Stevenson hasn't been brought back?
Several people ask me on YouTube comments or Twitter comments every day if the Pacers will soon be signing Lance. As of now, they have no spots to do so, but who knows what the Pacers are up to.
Well, at least they brought back Servetus. They lost Brogdon, Ricky Rubio, who never played a game here, Stevenson, Dwayne Washington, who's now in Phoenix, Gabe York, and Nate Hinton. And this is the thing I think everyone wants to hear about, Tony, outside of trades, which I would hope in an hour's time when this gets posted that no trades have gone down. But Myles Turner ended the season not playing again with a foot issue. We're expecting that he is ready to go to begin the season, and Chris Duarte battled that toe issue towards the end of last season as well. These guys are fit, healthy, ready to go.
Turner, definitely. I think that if the Pacers were any good last year, there's a chance he could have played near the end of the season. Probably not till, late March, early April, but he's been working out this summer just fine, moving okay. I think he'll be good to go when the season starts. Duarte, and I am very intrigued by what his injury happens to be, because we went into Summer League. Duarte played, but in the very first Summer League practice, he said, Coach Ronald Norad said, yeah, he's still dealing with this toe thing. We're watching it a little bit, which was stunning to me because it had now been 4 months at that time, 3.5 months since it happened. And he still practiced, did everything in practice and played in one Summer League game and was so good, they just pulled him. And now he's playing for the Dominican Republic. Like, all the external signs say he's totally good to go. He's healthy, but he said it still bugs him and it's something that they're monitoring. So I think he's good to go, but the fact that it was something they felt like mentioning 3.5 months later is still noteworthy to an extent.
And it was something that bothered him I feel like for about 3 months in season as well. I feel like he was in and out of the lineup, and maybe it's just tanking and all that sort of stuff. But you're right, if it's still persisting now, is this just something that's just going to be an issue moving forward? Let's hope not. But it wasn't like it was one injury in season as well. He was sort of constantly in and out of the lineup. It felt to me from an external perspective that he was just in and out consistently with things happening there in that second half of the year.
Yeah, and it's different, I think, for the Pacers from an external perspective, because every player on their team was in and out of the lineup last season. So it's hard for me to remember who was consistently out versus in and out when their whole team got traded midseason and they had a big COVID absence at the end of December and various guys. It was impossible to keep track of the flow of injuries. But yes, he did have a lot of spats in and out of the lineup before he was ultimately done in late February.
We're going to talk about starting lineups in a second. Before we talk about that, if you keep on saying you need to make a budget, but you never do, and it's something you just keep missing your credit card payments, you're afraid to look at your bank statements, and it's time to take back control of your financial life. Meet Rocket Money, formerly Truebill, our favorite financial app. So why did Truebill change its name to Rocket Money? Well, basically now it's backed by Rocket Company, so there's that, but it's grown from just a bill management app into a full-on personal finance empowerment tool that helps over 3.4 million people with budgeting, lowering bills, canceling subscriptions, and more, saving each of their members on average $700 a year. And with all that growth comes the next evolution in Truebill's story, a new name. Bottom line is, Rocket Money is everything that you've loved about Truebill, but with a fresh look and feel. So start canceling your unused subscriptions and save money at rocketmoney.com/LockedOnNBA. That's rocketmoney.com/LockedOnNBA. You go download the app from the Apple App Store or the Google Play Store. Tony, your projected starting five has Tyrese Haliburton, Benedict Mathurin, Chris Duarte, Jalen Smith, and Myles Turner. I agree with 4 of those. I think that, again, we don't know, because we don't know what the hell is happening with Buddy Hield or Myles Turner, but given the way that Buddy Hield has pissed and moaned at times in the past, and by times I mean every time that he hasn't been a starter, and the fact that when he came last season and played 35 minutes a night and was doing so much stuff for them, I thought they would go with him in there next to Mathurin. But the Mathurin, Hield, Duarte trio, 2 of those are going to start. And again, we don't know who it's going to be. Do you sort of see them all playing similar roles? Who would be the priority there out of that group, do you think?
Yeah, but I hear a lot of those arguments of people who want to say for development purposes, maybe Duarte is the sixth man. He can have the ball more and put pressure there. To me, and from the Pacers' perspective, it would seem like they want to get those three guys, Duarte, Mathurin, and Haliburton, as many minutes together as possible this year as they sort of develop and launch into whatever the next era of Pacers basketball is. Now, the opposite argument is, like you just said, Buddy Hield got traded to the Pacers and was immediately way better, right? More rebounds, better assists, shooting well, was a good player. And one, that's helpful to have, but two, spacing is valuable for these young players. So him being out there, even if he isn't on the team long term, will be helpful for the development of these young guys. So I think that regardless of who starts and who comes off the bench, the minutes for these guys won't change too much compared to if they had started or come off the bench anyway. So Hield in for Duarte makes sense to me. I get why they would do that, or even in for Mathurin. I don't think they would do that, but I guess I would get it. But I think those three guys will take up a majority of those minutes at the 2-3.
Is there any issue with the fact that literally none of these guys are actually threes? Look, Duarte was a point guard in college. He's played mainly two last season, a little bit of three. Mathurin is just not really big enough to be a three. Like, he's sort of there, but he's not really. He's almost strictly a two. Hield has played a lot of three, but he's really a two. Like, there's the only three on this roster is Kendall Brown, and he's not going to be in the rotation, really. Like, there's just no wings here.
Yeah, I've covered the Pacers for 5 years, and Justin Holiday kind of, and Doug McDermott kind of, and that's it. I mean, they haven't really ever had Torrey Craig last year for a little bit before they traded him away. I mean, they have never really had quality. It was basically since they lost Bogdanovich in 2019, 2018, they haven't really had quality wings. They've been makeshifting it with guys like O'Shea Brissett, who's better at the four, and like you said, Buddy Hield, and things like that to kind of get through and get by. And Duarte's close to wing sized. He's 6'5", 6'6"-ish, but I think most would cast him as a guard instead of a wing. So yeah, whoever's there, even if it is Brissett coming down from the four, will likely be out of position a lot of the time.
Jalen Smith really didn't get a look in Phoenix, came to Indiana, played pretty well. They were limited in what they could sign him. They did sign him, and they have promised him a starting job, which seemed weird on the surface, but I don't really know who else they're going to give it to, because he is significantly better than what O'Shea Brissett is. And I know that I argue against this, and there are a lot of people who play fantasy and look at the way that fantasy sites gives designations and go, well, they'll just play Isaiah Jackson at the 4 because he's listed as a power forward. He played at the 4, I think 0 minutes last season. He is not a power forward. He is a center, and unless you want to disagree with me on that. So Smith, to me, is clearly that best option there. And yeah, Jackson's just not a 4, is he?
Yeah, Jackson ideally should be a 5. The franchise did try last year to say this guy can play the 4, and to be fair, he can defend a lot of positions to the point that it wouldn't be bad if he played the 4. Like, I think they'll try to stick him out there with another big at times this season. But yeah, I mean, he's going to be more naturally a 5, especially offensively when he doesn't have any real shooting touch or floor game. So he'll get bullied by post players defensively at the 5, and that's why I think they'll try to have him at least this coming season at the 4 a little bit. But I think naturally, as his career grows, yes, he is definitely a 5 long term.
Why did they promise Smith this job so early?
Good question is my actual answer. Look, part of it was, like you mentioned earlier, they had some contract limitations to even keep him in Indiana, right? They were the only team in the league bound by this rule because of how rookie scale contracts work. So, making it a big deal when they signed him and having this big promotion and promising him the starting spot and giving him the player option, they did everything they could to keep him. And I think that was part of it. Now, he was good for them last year. I think the numbers behind it. Like, he actually was a good player for them. I would never promise really anyone a starting spot when their career's been inconsistent to this point. But he was legitimately good for them. I think giving him playing time is important. But I was pretty surprised they were on July 6th ready to say, this guy is our starting power forward this coming season.
Yeah, the saying it is the issue, because I look at the roster and go, there's actually nobody else who I would have even entertained that would have had that spot. Like O'Shea Brissett, he's absolutely fine as a 9th man. Like, he's a backup. That's what he is. He's not a good starting player. And Jalen Smith's the guy you want to try and develop there. But just coming out and saying, wow, like this is like the crown jewel in everything we've ever done in our history, that Jalen Smith is bang, he's starting, let's go from there. Like, maybe, but I didn't know it needed to be announced. So that was a little bit weird to me. In terms of the rest of the rotation, 10-man group here, we've got TJ McConnell, Buddy Hield, Aaron Nesmith, Brissett, and Jackson. I'm not convinced that Nesmith is an NBA quality player, but they don't really have many other options there to get into that role. Where's the Red Rooster Terry Taylor fit into this group?
Yeah, I think, he actually production-wise was, as good numerically as Brissett or Jackson last year. I think it's tougher when you're a 6'5" player who's best at center, especially given where the Pacers have most of their young guys, Brissett, Jackson, Batadze, who we haven't even discussed yet. Even Turner's young, Jalen Smith, our front court players. Fitting in Terry Taylor's hard unless they're willing to play him at the three. And if his three-point shot improves, maybe that would make some sense. He did have a little bit of floor game last year. So to fit him in, one of Brissett or Nesmith would have to play less or not at all. And like you said, maybe Nesmith just truly isn't an NBA player. I think they're going to try. He's an ex-lottery pick and a key part of the Brogdon trade return. But there's a chance Terry Taylor's just better now, and they just insert him as the backup three. So I don't think he'll start the season in the rotation, but he was good enough for them last year that he's got a good shot of taking Brissett or Nesmith or even Jackson's minutes if he plays well.
Give us the good word here. Look, where are we at with Turner and Hield? Like, are we expecting them to be on this team in camp, Christmas, deadline? Like, what's the story here?
Yeah, it's similar for both. That look, the Pacers have 15 players signed right now, and I think 11 of them are 25 or younger. Right? It's very clear what their direction is and what their plan is for this season and even maybe next year too. Buddy Hield is older than that. Myles Turner's 26. He's barely older than that. But I think that is the crux of it is they're not in the Pacers' range of like clear development young players. Now with Turner, the other factor is his contract is expiring. Like they're not going to lose him for nothing, even if it means they sell him for pennies on the dollar compared to offers they've gotten in the past. I don't think he makes it on the team past February if he has not signed a contract extension. Hield's got 2 years left. He's a little overpaid. The Lakers apparently want him. And the Pacers have to get to the salary floor somehow at some point. So it seems like to me, one or both of them could get traded for like a massive contract in return. And that's a way to get a better asset in exchange for them. So I think it's more likely than not neither of them finish the season with the Pacers. But Turner is substantially less likely to finish the year than Buddy is with the team, just given that he is on an expiring deal.
All right, so let's phrase it this way then. If Russell Westbrook does arrive in Indiana, does he actually play for Indiana?
No, I would say there is a lot of John Wall in Houston last year potential for that situation.
Let's talk about some younger guys on this team. I'm looking at guys 22 and under. We've talked Mathurin. We've talked a little bit about Isaiah Jackson. But what about Kendall Brown? We talked about wing-size players, and they have none. Like they have one. That's Kendall Brown, who defensively I think can be pretty good, but offensively pretty limited in terms of lack of usage, lack of aggression, lack of three-point shooting. They're probably not going to give him much of an opportunity immediately. But what are your thoughts on seeing him in Summer League?
Yeah, he was impressive in Summer League to me with his speed and athleticism, which is something they have really leaned on in recent seasons as traits that they liked. Rick Carlisle even calling out, like, we're not going to be last in the league in dunks anymore. They want to be a more athletic team. And Ronald Norred, their Summer League head coach and assistant coach, was saying that one day in practice they were doing, some sort of sprints, line touching drills, and he turned away for about 2 seconds and turned back, and Kendall Brown was, 20, 30 feet ahead of every other player. He is really fast. He is very athletic. That is his traits. Like you said, though, there are a lot of holes in his game that prevent him from being an everyday player or a guy they consider further rotation. So I think he could have a chance to be around the Pacers a lot if he's on a two-way or even get a roster spot because he is one of their only wings, because they need to hit the salary floor somehow. And they traded to get him. Like they didn't have the pick that they got him with. They traded for it. I think they do like him, but he still isn't signed. It's not really clear what they're trying to figure out to do with his roster spot at this time. So I think that they do like him. I think there's a chance maybe late in the season he sniffs the rotation, kind of like what happened with Dwayne Washington and Terry Taylor to a lesser extent this past season. But I think at the start of the year, he'll probably be one of their back end of the roster guys as they try to figure out what he is.
You said he still isn't signed.
It's correct. He's officially not signed, which very telling for a team that may or may not be looped into a 3-team trade for a star.
That is very. I thought I saw a while ago that he signed a two-way, but apparently not. Interesting.
That is reportedly what he will sign, but I think they could do that anytime. The fact that they haven't yet is very telling to me.
Yeah, that is really interesting because I've just got it listed as two-way. I saw it somewhere that he was signing a two-way, and you are correct. He has actually not signed, and he remains a second-round pick who is not signed. That's him, and Christian Koloko is another one in Toronto who's a second-round pick who just hasn't signed a deal yet. So who knows what's going on. Now, Pacers owner Herb Simon is notoriously anti-tanking. We'd rather push and be good and give the people something interesting to watch. We saw them pack it away for the last 6 weeks, 2 months of last season. Does Herb Simon have the stomach? Does Rick Carlisle have the stomach to do it for another season, or are they going to be, yep, hey, let's push for the play-in. Let's see what we've got. We've tanked for our one season. We've got Haliburton's our jewel here. We've got Mathurin to develop along him. There's a lot of people who are worried, like, I'm not going to draft Tyrese Haliburton in fantasy because the Pacers are just going to shut him down. Whereas in last season, they were tanking. They played him like 37 minutes a night. So what's the tanking? What's the tanking idea? Are they embracing it? Will they sit these guys down again? Like, not the older guys. Will they sit the younger guys down? Like, what's the plan here?
I think they will try to win every game they can. I also think they have a bad team. Like
true.
marrying up those points in the context of what people consider tanking can be challenging. Like, they will be bad. They will not win a lot of games. They have, the third lowest over-under win total of any team in the league for DraftKings right now. Like, I think it's only San Antonio and Houston that are lower. Like, they just have a bad team. And so if they shut down young players, like, that's clearly tanking. But that they only shut down, even if you will, Brogdon last year. Like, it's not something they do. It's not something Herb Simon likes to do. So I think that it took a lot for them to even convince him last year that winning 26 games would be better than winning 36. So I think that this year it's easier for them to say, we have a bad team, but we will try our hardest every single night to win games, and it will be better for us long term. So it depends how you define tanking. If you think that losing on purpose or shutting guys down is tanking, I don't think they will do that sort of thing. I just think they're naturally not very good this year.
I agree. I agree that these guys, but Haliburton's going to play as much as he can because they want to. They love, seeing these guys put up numbers, and like, hey, if he works his way into All-Star discussion, that's something that they'll just promote the shit out of for the next 2 years. Look at our young All-Star guard, and to bring people in and to build up from there. So they will give these guys plenty of opportunities. Now, we've talked a little bit about Myles Turner already, and Jalen Smith and Isaiah Jackson. Is this the plan for the front court of the future? Like, this is what we're going to see. Like, this is what they want. Jackson Smith, bang, we're set here.
Yeah, I think so. Maybe Brissett's mixed in a little bit, although they could have given him, sent him into restricted free agency and kept him for longer this summer, and they didn't do that. So I think Smith's in there. I think Jackson's in there. We've said Goga's name twice. I have no idea.
Oh, yeah, where that was fit. Because he started over Jackson last season. Like, when that Turner was out, Goga was the starter, not Jackson, and I thought he played well. And I think Goga's actually a starting caliber, low end, but starting caliber player in the NBA. I just don't think it's on this team.
Post All-Star break, he was really solid this past season. One challenge with him is the new Pacers, like I just talked about, that Rick Carlisle's talking about with athleticism and speed. Goga's good at a lot of things. Being fast and athletic are not two of them. So I think that he is probably on the outside just because of the style they're choosing. And I think Jackson and Smith and maybe Turner or Brissett or another young big sneaks in as their front court of the future. But right now, it's not totally clear since Turner and Goga are still around.
We haven't really talked about Tyrese Haliburton. I'm going to talk about him in a second, but he is the primary creator. And we saw last season that Buddy Hield took on that sort of secondary creation role. I don't know if Hield can do that full-time for a full season. Duarte's got, I guess, some ability there. Like, do you see it as Duarte is going to have to be that guy? So that's why he'll be in that starting lineup because Smith can't handle the ball. Turner is one of the worst passers and dribblers in the NBA. So who do they look to be that secondary guy? Because Haliburton, I think if you task Haliburton with being the guy that runs every single action, every single play, it's going to fail to a degree. Like, he just can't have that level of load. So who is going to be that, or is Mathurin someone they develop into that role?
I think Duarte and Hield have the best chance to do it early in the season. Like you said, like, I didn't watch a ton of the Kings, but I never saw Buddy Hield dribble around a screen and pass as much as he did with the Pacers.
No, it was crazy. How different he was. I don't know. He like doubled his assist rate. Everything just, I did not believe that it was happening. I'd never seen it before.
I say this a lot just as a weird anecdote, but like, a lot of players get traded and they get to their new team and they say, I really enjoyed my time with the old team. I'm excited to get started here, right? Buddy Hield got to Indiana and he was like, yeah, I hated the Kings. Like, it's so rare that it was kind of refreshing that he was just so honest about it.
Buddy Hield said he hated the Kings when he was in Sacramento. Like, when he was there, he was like, I hate this team. Can you get me out of here? Like, if you ask any Kings reporter, they go, yeah, he hated it for like years. Like, he wasn't shy about it.
So I think some of it was he was just like, yes, this is awesome. This is new. This is refreshing. And maybe if he's still starting, like you said, a role that he thinks he should have, maybe he can continue to do that. I think Duarte has showed some of it last year, not a lot. His passing's kind of limited right now, but his reads improved quickly as the season went on. I think those two will be the guys would like to do it. And then as the season gets later on and wins become less important, or they sell out vets or whatever, they'll try to force feed Mathurin to do it as much as they can and see if they can develop some of that down the stretch.
Who's a breakout candidate on this team? Is it Haliburton?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, there's a lot of places have him as the favorite for most improved, if I'm not mistaken. I don't check odds too much, but near the top of that sort of thing. And, he put up really good stats when he played without Brogdon last year. I mean, it's really obvious to me that he can read the game at a high level, and this team plays in a way that's beneficial to him. I think he's a guy that has a really good opportunity to become, one of the faces of the Eastern Conference at some point in the next couple of years.
I guess the question is with him is like, can he actually be the number one? Can he be a 25-plus usage player? Can he average 20 points? I'm not sure he's got that level of aggression in his offensive game, especially if he is playing next to Mathurin and Hield, because they're not going to be shy about taking shots. So can he establish himself? I think he can run the team. There is no problem with that. He can be their best player. He can be hyper-efficient, but can he be a guy that just dominates possessions, just gets out there and drops 20 a night? Or is he going to be more like a Chris Paul who would average 18 or 19 and 10 rather than 25 and 8?
Yeah, I think that's something he's himself had to say I've had to work on, that he isn't always as aggressive as he needs to be, or isn't looking for a shot as much. So I think he could set the Pacers franchise record for assists, for example, but I don't know that he'll necessarily be a 20 to 25 points a game scorer. One comp that has always come up to me in terms of the combination of passing and shooting is Mark Price from the Cavs, in the late 80s to mid 90s. And he would never reach 20 points a game in his career, despite being a super talented player, multi-time All-Star. That sort of statistical threshold makes a lot of sense to me for Tyrese. I think he can, like you said, be their engine, be their best player, but not going to be a really high usage, putting up all the shots type of guy.
Is there anyone that's a regression candidate?
That is a good question. Jalen Smith actually stands out to me, ironically, in that way. I know he ended up with good stats with the Pacers, but first 11 games, he was at 42% from three. And then the last 11 games, I think he was down to 32 or 31. Who knows how much it was just a flash in the pan that coincided with the trade that, wow, this guy's really good. And I think he'll be better than he was with the Suns. He clearly showed that he can do more with a bigger role, but he's a guy that could not maybe reach the level he was at with the Pacers for a lot of time last season, especially if he's overcast in the starting role. Outside of that, though, it's hard for me to think of anyone that is super aging out of their role or might not play too much. Maybe TJ McConnell, but he barely played last year. I don't know what his role is even going to be for this team long term. So I think Smith's probably the biggest one to me.
McConnell was a favorite of past coaches, but Carlisle wasn't as enamored with his game, and I was worried about that heading into last season. And then he got injured, of course, but he was a very different role for TJ. His lack of shooting and his absolute need to have the ball in his hands to have anything impactful happen. Is there a chance that he is overtaken by Nembhard at some point this season? He doesn't feel like a Carlisle player to me.
Yeah, everybody when he came here was kind of like, oh, look, the next JJ Barea, right?
Yeah, no.
Who Carlisle loved and played all the time. But JJ Barea could kind of shoot. He was like a 35 to 40% outside shooter, 3 attempts a game. And so McConnell has a lot of similar qualities. I get why they got compared. He's white. But and tiny and and fast. But
not that Barea's white necessarily, but yeah, you know what I mean.
Carlisle is very much encouraging of, if you're in the game, I think you should shoot. And McConnell can't really shoot. They don't jive perfectly. McConnell was good for the Pacers at times last year. There was a 3-game stretch where he was their best player, and it looked like he might save their season in November before he got hurt. But I think at some point, as this team pivots to use McConnell's their oldest player, they might look to get Nembhard in there. They just gave him the biggest contract for a second-round pick ever in terms of guaranteed money. They clearly like him some, despite some turnover struggles in summer league. So yeah, I think at some point they have to make that pivot and turn. And maybe that's your question earlier about tanking. That would be a not tanking move, but closer to it. Of let's put this 22-year-old inexperienced guy in over TJ McConnell.
He had the biggest second round contract ever. That was he overtook the guy that signed the contract 2 days before. That overtook the guy that signed the contract 2 days before, and then Kennedy Chandler 2 days before that. There's 4 guys in a row that all took on that mantle. This is an easy one, Tony. Is this team better than last season?
No, they are worse. They don't have Sabonis. They don't have LeVert. They don't have Brogdon. Ironically, though, with how many close games they actually lost last year, more stability, no coaching change, I think they'll win about the same number of games, but their net rating will be a lot worse, and they will be worse.
We know that the most likely players to be traded are Hield and Turner, but is Turner the singular most likely player to be traded?
I would say so, given that his contract is expiring, that at some point this year he will, either be extended or be on the move. I mean, there's no point of keeping him through the year unless somehow they're really good or in the playoff picture, but that would be very stunning to me. So I think he's definitely the singular most likely to be traded player.
All right, now some fun to end things out. Some quiz questions for you, Tony. Basketball Index has a bunch of metrics, and the three that I've been looking at: 3-point shooting talent, playmaking talent, and finishing talent. It's not the highest percentage from three-point land. It's about self-creation. It's about difficulty of shots. It's about basically who's the guy that you think's the best three-point shooter that when you need a three, whatever it needs to be done with, catch and shoot in the corner, off the break, pull-up, logo, whatever it is, that's the guy you want. Playmaking, it's not about assists. It's about some of it's assists. It's about potential assists and getting guys open and getting assists to the right spot and versatility of passes. And finishing's about driving through contact. Some of it's finishing at the rim, but some of it's driving and drawing fouls and just basically who's the best finisher. So I want to see how the people that cover the team would view that for guys that ended the team on the ended the season on the team last year. So not including. Or guys who are still on the team, so not including a Brogdon, not including a Sabonis, those sort of guys. So let's look at who you think would have graded out as having the highest three-point shooting talent for this team.
Got to be Buddy Hield. I mean, he is a great shooter and takes a lot of tough threes. Well, I think it's got to be Buddy Hield.
I thought it was going to be Buddy Hield as well, but it was actually Tyrese Haliburton that graded out higher because he had an insane 42% shooting, I think he was, from three. So he graded out there. Playmaking talent.
I would have guessed the guy who just won the 3-point one, Tyrese Haliburton, although I suppose McConnell gets in the lane a lot, but I think it's got to be Tyrese, yeah.
It is definitely Tyrese. And if you get this one, you are a certified Pacers genius. Who graded out as the best finisher on this team, highest finishing talent?
Yeah, when I read through it, I kind of thought maybe Duarte or Isaiah Jackson. They do pretty well around the rim, but nobody really stood out to me. O'Shea Brissett kind of dunks a lot. So I don't have a good answer, so I guess I'll just go with Chris Duarte.
I don't know if I have a good answer either, but I have the actual answer, and that is the Red Rooster, Terry Taylor.
Hey, that's not surprising.
I think that the highest graded guy on the Pacers last season was Sabonis, but of course he's not on this team anymore, so he doesn't count in that area. So it is Terry Taylor who is the highest rated guy there. Now, last question for you, if I can bring it up. Tyrese Haliburton, we know that orchestrated a lot of the offense. He had the ball. He generated a ton of assists. But who assisted Tyrese Haliburton the most last season?
Wow. Holy cow. That is Buddy Hield and him played the most together, so that feels like the most natural answer. But I feel like you wouldn't be putting it up as a trick question. But Buddy Hield's my guess. Buddy
Hield is correct. So, Buddy,
yes,
I think he tripled the next guy in terms of who was setting up Tyrese Haliburton, which again, for Buddy Hield, who just generates no assists ever in his career when he was dropping 4 a night, it didn't make any sense. But it's what happened, and we'll see if it carries over. Tony, that is the Indiana Pacers covered for this off-season, pre-season. I'm sure there'll be other stuff happening with them in the coming weeks and months, and hey, if people want to hear all about it, they can find you over at Locked On Pacers. What's going on at Locked On Pacers this week?
Yeah, we got an interview with a player who actually signed with the Magic this summer, played for the Pacers in Summer League, talk about that experience, run through their schedule, talking about Rick Carlisle coaching this team. Lots of fun stuff, especially with FIBA play coming up. So just to see these guys play on Locked On Pacers this week.
Go check that out over at Locked On Pacers, YouTube, and wherever you find podcasts. Tony, thanks for coming on Locked On Fantasy Basketball with me.
Thanks for having me, Josh.
And that will do it for me today with the Pacers. I'll be back later on with another couple of shows, team previews coming today, so stay tuned for those. Follow Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, and on the Odyssey app. If you're here on YouTube, thumb it up and leave your comments down below. Guys, we are done here. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya.